but an obese 16T year. Bald was sold to Mountain Man as punishment by her father, but he had shocking plans.
Lila had always felt different. At 16, she was bigger than most of the other girls at school, and the weight she carried seemed to follow her everywhere.
Every mirror reflected a face that looked tired, a body that felt heavy, and a sense of shame she could never shake. She had learned to keep her eyes down, to make herself small in a world that constantly reminded her she didn't fit in. Her classmates whispered behind her back, and even though she tried to ignore it, the sting of their words cut deep. Her home was no safer. Her father, Harold, was a man of strict rules and harsh punishments. He believed that children should be molded into obedience through fear rather than love. Every mistake, every moment of weakness was a reason for his anger. And Lila, with her slow movements and frequent exhaustion, seemed to be a constant target. Her mother, soft-spoken and tired from years of trying to maintain peace, often turned a blind eye. She avoided confrontations, thinking that as long as no one got hurt physically, things would be fine. But Lila knew better. Hurt could take many forms, and some of the deepest scars were invisible. That morning had started like any other. Lila woke before sunrise. As she always did, her stomach heavy and her heart heavier. She went to the small kitchen to prepare breakfast, carefully measuring oatmeal and milk, making sure she didn't spill anything. Her father had always criticized her for wasting food or moving too slowly. As she placed the bowl on the table, Harold appeared in the doorway, his face stern, his arms crossed. "Why are you so slow, Lila?" he barked. "Break. How many times do I have to tell you to hurry? You're lazy, and your weight is your fault." "You don't try hard enough." She wanted to explain that she couldn't move faster, that even the smallest task left her exhausted, but words failed her. She lowered her gaze, muttered a quiet apology, and continued eating. Harold's anger didn't stop there. He began pacing the room, his boots clicking on the worn wooden floor. "You think I'll keep letting you waste your life," he said. "Breaths. You think I'll let you stay here and do nothing while the world passes you by?" Lila could barely breathe. She knew what was coming next. Her father had punishments for everything, and lately, his punishments had grown stranger, harsher. "Pack your things, Harold," said suddenly, his voice cold. "You're going somewhere. Somewhere you'll learn what it means to work, to respect yourself, to survive."
"Where?" Lila whispered, her voice shaking.
Please, don't."
"You'll see," Harold interrupted. "You'll understand soon enough."
"You need this, even if you don't know it yet." The words made Lila's stomach twist into knots. She had no idea where she was going or what her father had planned. Fear bubbled inside her, a mixture of dread and hopelessness. She grabbed a small bag, stuffing it with the few clothes she owned and the little she felt she could call her own. Her mother watched silently from the corner, her eyes full of sadness but her lips sealed. The journey began early that afternoon. Lila was led out of the small, dusty town and into the vast countryside. Trees stretched endlessly on either side of the narrow dirt road, their branches forming a tunnel that seemed to close in around her. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. She had never been this far from home, and the unknown terrified her more than any punishment could. Her father said little during the trip. His silence was heavy, almost worse than his words. Lila kept her eyes fixed on the ground, trying to make herself as small as possible, as if shrinking could make the journey end faster. Every mile seemed endless. Her legs ached from sitting too long, her back ached from tension, and yet she couldn't complain. Her father's glare was enough to silence her. As they neared the mountains, Lila saw the first signs of life outside her small town. Streams cut through the rocks, birds called to each other in the dense forest. and the wind carried whispers of places she had never imagined. But beauty could not calm her fear. Her heart raced with every passing tree, every bend in the road. She had heard stories of the mountain man, Ezekiel, the recluse who lived deep in the woods. People said he was strict, harsh, and solitary, but fair if he chose to be. That was all Lila knew. And now, she was about to meet him. When they finally arrived, the cabin appeared almost magically through the trees. It was small and made of rough-hewn logs, smoke curling from a single chimney. It seemed isolated, a place where the world couldn't reach her. Harold stopped the wagon and turned to Lila, his expression unreadable. "This is where you'll stay," he said. "He will take care of you. He will teach you. If you're lucky, you'll return a better person. If not..." His words trailed off, but the threat hung in the air. Lila's stomach churned. She stepped down from the wagon, her legs weak, her hands trembling. The door to the cabin opened, and a tall man emerged, breaths. His face was weathered, with deep lines etched by years of sun and wind. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and assessing. He looked at Lila without judgment, but his gaze was firm, almost piercing.
"You must be Lila," he said in a voice that was deep but calm. "Your father told me you'd be coming. I don't do things lightly, and I don't tolerate excuses."
"You'll have work to do, and I expect you to do it well." Lila swallowed hard. I'll try," she whispered. "Try isn't enough here," Ezekiel said. "You'll do, or you'll learn why you must." The cabin's interior was simple, a single room with a fireplace, a small table, a bed, and a few shelves with tools and supplies. Everything had a purpose, and there was no space for clutter or laziness. Lila felt both fear and awe. It was a place where she couldn't hide, where she couldn't be small. The first tasks were simple, yet exhausting. She chopped wood, swept the floor, carried water from the nearby stream, and helped with basic cooking. Every movement left her muscles aching, every breath reminding her of her body's limits.
But Ezekiel did not mock her or scold her unnecessarily.
He corrected her, showed her the right way, and expected her to learn.
As the days passed, Lila began to notice small changes.
For her movements became steadier, her stamina slowly increased, and her confidence, tiny as it was, began to grow. She still missed home, still felt the sting of her father's betrayal, but for the first time she realized she could do more than she thought. Breath. She could survive. Evenings were the hardest. Lila would sit by the fire, exhausted, and think of her father's harsh words. She hated him, yet part of her longed for his approval. But Ezekiel would sit nearby, silently, not intruding, but present. His quiet strength was different from her father's anger. It was steady, reliable, and oddly comforting. One night, after a long day of work, Ezekiel spoke. You are stronger than you realize," he said simply. "Your father may have given up on showing it, but it's true. You have to find it yourself."
Lila looked into the fire, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't know if I can," she whispered.
"Despot, you can," he said firmly. "It will be hard. You will fail. You will struggle. But each time you will learn. That is the only way to grow." That night, Lila slept fitfully, her body sore, her mind racing. But for the first time in her life, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this punishment, terrifying as it was, could teach her something her father never could. Maybe she could become someone who mattered, not because anyone told her she should, but because she found it inside herself. And so, in the shadow of the mountains, with the wind whistling through the trees and the fire crackling in the cabin, Lila's story truly began. But she did not yet know what the future held, nor what challenges awaited her. But for the first time she understood that strength was not given. It was earned, one hard, painful step at a time. Lila woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the small cabin window. The smell of pine and damp earth filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of the fire that Ezekiel had kept burning through the night. Her muscles ached from the day before, her arms sore from chopping wood and her legs stiff from carrying water from the stream. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the exhaustion. Ezekiel was already awake, sitting at the table with a pot of steaming tea. He looked up at her with a calm expression. "Morning," he said simply. "Today we have work to do." Lila nodded, her stomach twisting. Break in the mountains was nothing like the small chores she had done at home. Every task required strength, patience, and endurance. Even the simplest things, gathering firewood, cleaning the cabin, fetching water, felt impossible at first. But Ezekiel never let her give up. He guided her hand, corrected her movements, and expected her to try again until she succeeded. The first week was the hardest. Breath. Every morning, Lila felt her body resist. Her lungs burned when she climbed the steep paths to the water source, and her hands blistered from carrying logs. She wanted to cry, to give up, to tell Ezekiel that she couldn't do it. But each time she opened her mouth to complain, she remembered her father's words, the harsh punishment that had brought her here. She clenched her jaw and forced herself to continue. Ezekiel was strict but fair. He didn't shout or belittle her, but he never let her take shortcuts. "If you do something, do it right," he told her one morning as she tried to rush through chopping wood. "Half effort is worse than none. If you fail properly and learn from it." At first, Lila felt frustrated. She had never been asked to work like this before. At home, her father only demanded obedience, not skill or effort. Here, failure was not punished with anger. It was corrected with patience and guidance. Slowly, she began to understand. The work was not meant to punish her. It was meant to teach her something she had never learned, that she could do more than she thought, that her body was capable of strength, and that effort had value. As the days turned into weeks, Lila started noticing small changes. She could climb the hill to the stream without stopping halfway. Her hands became stronger, the blisters healing faster than before. Even her posture changed. She walked with more confidence, her movements less hesitant. Ezekiel observed silently, nodding occasionally when he saw her improvement, but he never praised her unnecessarily. Praise, he seemed to believe, was earned, not given.
The mountains were not just a place of work. They were also a place of learning.
Ezekiel taught her how to read the weather by watching the clouds, how to listen to the wind to know when a storm was coming, and how to identify plants that were safe to eat.
Lila had never been taught these things at home.
Her father had always believed that such skills were unnecessary, that school and obedience were enough. But here, Lila realized that knowledge could mean survival, that awareness and skill could build confidence in ways she had never known. Despite the hard work, Lila still felt lonely. She missed her friends from school, even the teasing, because at least it was familiarity. She missed her mother's soft voice and the small comforts of home. At night, she would sit by the fire wrapped in a thin blanket and stare at the flames. The mountains were beautiful, but they were also vast and isolating. The wind whistled through the trees and shadows danced across the cabin walls, reminding her of just how far she was from everything she had ever known. Ezekiel noticed her quiet moments. One evening, as she stared into the fire, he sat beside her. "It's hard," he said simply, "being away from what you know. Being asked to do things that scare you. But it is also the only way to find out who you really are."
Lila looked at him, her eyes wide. "I don't feel strong," she admitted.
Desperation.
I feel like I'm barely surviving. You are stronger than you think, Ezekiel replied. Strength is not just about muscles.
It is about perseverance. It is about getting up when you fall. You are learning that now, even if it doesn't feel like it. His words were simple, but they settled into her mind. For the first time, she began to see herself differently. Maybe she was more capable than her father had ever allowed her to believe. Maybe she didn't need anyone's approval to know her own worth. One morning, Lila faced a new challenge. Ezekiel led her to a steep cliff overlooking a wide valley. "We are going to gather herbs today," he said. "Some grow only on cliffs like this. You must climb carefully." Fear gripped her stomach. The height made her knees shake, and the wind felt like it could push her over the edge. "Brett, I can't," she said, her voice trembling. "You can," Ezekiel said firmly. "I will not let you fall. You only need to focus. Breaths, one step at a time. That is all anyone can do." Lila took a deep breath and started climbing. Her hands scraped against the rough stone, and her legs trembled with each step. She wanted to give up many times, but Ezekiel's steady voice guided her. Breath. Focus. You can do this. By the time she reached the top, her arms were sore, her heart racing, but a strange feeling of pride washed over her. She had done something she never thought possible. She had faced fear, pushed through it, and succeeded. For the first time, she felt a flicker of accomplishment that had nothing to do with her father's approval or anyone else's judgment. The days continued with a rhythm of work, learning, and reflection.
Lila grew stronger physically, but more importantly, she grew stronger mentally.
She learned that mistakes were not the end of the world, that patience and persistence could overcome obstacles, and that she had more control over her life than she had ever imagined. Ezekiel also shared stories of his own past, though carefully. He spoke of hardships, of challenges he had faced in the mountains alone, and how he had learned to survive through patience, observation, and self-reliance. Lila listened, fascinated, realizing that everyone had struggles, even those who seemed strong or fearless. Dest, she began to understand, was not something you were born with, it was something you built over time. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the cabin, wind howled through the trees, and the fire sputtered in the fireplace. Lila watched from the window, feeling a pang of fear. She had never faced weather like this at home, but Ezekiel remained calm. "Storms pass," he said. "They are scary, but they are also a part of life."
You cannot control them, only how you react. Lila spent the afternoon helping him secure the cabin, moving supplies and tending the fire.
By the time the storm passed, she felt exhausted, but also capable for it. She realized that the world outside her small home was not as frightening as she had believed. She could face it, one task at a time. As weeks turned into months, Lila and Ezekiel developed a silent understanding. He never forced her to speak, but he encouraged her to think and observe. He never praised her unnecessarily, but he acknowledged her progress. Slowly, Lila began to respect him, not as a father figure, but as a teacher, a guide, and someone who saw potential in her that even she had doubted. Yet, despite all the growth, a part of Lila still longed for home. She thought about her father often, about the harsh words that had sent her here. She realized she was angry at him, hurt by his actions, and unsure if she would ever forgive him. But she also understood something new. She was no longer powerless. She had learned to take care of herself, to push beyond limits, and to see her own worth. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Lila sat outside the cabin, exhausted but reflective. Ezekiel joined her, sitting quietly beside her. "You've changed," he said simply.
I feel like I have, Lila replied softly.
"But I'm still scared of going back, of facing my father, of everything I left behind." "Fear is natural," he said. "It doesn't disappear."
"But you can act despite it. That is the real strength." Lila nodded. She looked at the mountains stretching endlessly before her, realizing how far she had come. The girl who had arrived terrified, weak, and unsure of herself was still here. But she was not the same. She had learned, grown, and discovered a resilience she had never imagined. Narration. And so, in the quiet of the mountains, amidst the hard work, the storms, and the lessons of survival, Lila's transformation continued. She would not return home as the same girl who had been sold to the mountain man. She would return stronger, wiser, and more certain of her own worth. Weeks had passed since Lila had first arrived at the mountain cabin. The girl who had stumbled into the forest terrified, weak, and unsure was now stronger, more confident, and beginning to understand the value of hard work and self-reliance. Every sunrise brought a new set of tasks, and every sunset left her exhausted, yet quietly proud of what she had accomplished. Ezekiel observed her closely, noting the changes. She moved faster. Her hands no longer blistered so easily, and her eyes held a spark he had not seen before. But there was still something missing, a sense of purpose, a belief that she could face the world beyond the mountains. It was time, he decided, to reveal the plan that would change everything. One morning after breakfast, Ezekiel handed Lila a list of chores. But this list was different. Instead of simple cleaning and gathering, it included tasks that would push her skills and courage to the limit. "Rest. Today," he said, "you begin the work that will prepare you for what comes next. This is not punishment. This is preparation." Lila looked at the list and felt a knot in her stomach. Boss, some tasks seemed impossible. She was to climb higher cliffs to gather rare herbs, cook over an open fire without guidance, and carry supplies through rough terrain. She wanted to protest, but Ezekiel's steady gaze silenced her. "You've learned to survive in small ways," he said.
"Now you will learn to thrive, to face challenges that test your body, mind, and spirit."
These lessons are not easy, but they are necessary. Her first task was to climb the steepest part of the mountain that overlooked a hidden valley. She had been nervous the last time she climbed a smaller cliff, but this one seemed endless. Jagged rocks jutting out in all directions, wind whipping through her hair, and the slope so steep that one wrong step could send her sliding. Her hands shook. Her heart raced, but she remembered Ezekiel's words. "One step at a time. Breathe. Desk. Focus. You can do this." Slowly, carefully, she began to climb. Her muscles ached. Her fingers scraped against the rocks, and her legs trembled, but she kept moving. She realized that fear, while still strong, no longer had the same power over her. She was stronger than the fear. When she reached the top, the view took her breath away. A hidden valley stretched out below, filled with wildflowers, streams, and the golden sunlight of morning. For a moment, she forgot about exhaustion, pain, and worry. She had done it. Ezekiel joined her at the top. He nodded approvingly. "You see," he said, "you can face challenges you thought impossible. That is the first lesson. Confidence grows when you do the things that scare you." The days that followed were filled with more tasks, each designed to test her in new ways. She learned to cook over open flames, balancing heat and timing to create meals that would nourish and sustain. She carried heavy loads of firewood and water through uneven paths, learning to trust her body and its growing strength. She tracked the movement of animals in the forest, noticing patterns and understanding their behavior. Breath. Each skill she learned was another layer of independence, another reminder that she could survive without anyone controlling her. But Ezekiel's plan was more than just teaching survival. He wanted Lila to discover something deeper, her own self-worth, her own potential, and the courage to make choices for herself. One afternoon, he explained the true purpose behind her stay in the mountains. "Your father thought he could punish you into obedience," he said. "He thought fear would teach you respect, but respect cannot be forced. Fear does not create strength. What you need is to learn your own power, your own ability to make decisions and stand by them. That is why you are here." Her heart pounding. She had long believed that her father's harshness was normal, that she deserved the anger and punishment. But Ezekiel's words made her realize that what she had endured was not her fault. She had value, and she had a right to be treated with respect. The realization was both liberating and frightening. She was starting to see herself as more than the scared, overweight girl her father had tried to control. One evening, Ezekiel set another challenge. He asked Lila to spend the night alone in a small cave halfway up the mountain. She was nervous. She had never been completely alone in such a wild and unfamiliar place. But she knew this was part of the plan. It was a test of her courage, her independence, and her ability to rely on herself. At first, the cave felt terrifying. Shadows stretched across the walls, the wind howled through the cracks, and the distant cries of animals echoed in the night. Lila's first instinct was to panic, to wish for the safety of the cabin and Ezekiel's presence. But then she remembered everything she had learned: how to start a fire, how to gather food, how to keep herself safe. She set up a small fire, ate the food she had packed, and sat quietly listening to the sounds of the mountain. As the night wore on, something unexpected happened. Lila began to feel a sense of calm. She realized she could face the darkness without fear. She could survive on her own. And in that moment, she felt a small spark of pride in herself and her courage and in the strength she had discovered.
The next morning, Ezekiel met her at the cave.
"You did well," he said. "You faced fear and learned that it cannot control you. That is the most important lesson of all." Lila smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She was changing, becoming someone stronger, more capable, and more confident. Ezekiel's plan also included teaching her the importance of decision-making and responsibility. He let her manage the cabin for a day, giving her control over tasks, schedules, and priorities. She struggled at first, making mistakes, forgetting tasks, and misjudging the time needed for certain chores. But Ezekiel guided her without taking over. She learned to correct her mistakes, to plan ahead, and to take responsibility for the outcomes of her decisions. Through these experiences, Lila began to see a pattern. Every challenge, every task, every moment of fear was designed to show her that she could handle life on her own. She didn't need to rely on her father's approval, the safety of home, or the pity of others. She had the power to shape her own life. One afternoon, Ezekiel took her to a clearing in the forest where a small stream flowed. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing to the clear water. "It's like life. Sometimes the path is smooth, sometimes it's rough. You can't control it, but you can choose how to move through it." Breath. Lila watched the stream, the sunlight reflecting off the rippling water. She understood what he meant. Her life had been filled with obstacles, fear, and control from others. But now she was learning to navigate it, to face challenges, and to grow stronger with each step. As the weeks passed, Lila's transformation became evident not only to Ezekiel but to herself. She could carry heavier loads, climb steeper paths, cook meals that were nourishing and tasty, and even help Ezekiel with tasks he thought she might never manage. Her confidence grew, and with it a quiet sense of independence. She was no longer the timid, fearful girl who had arrived at the cabin. She was becoming someone capable of facing the world. Ezekiel, watching her progress, knew the time was coming to reveal the final part of his plan. "One morning," he said, "you have learned much. You have grown stronger, braver, and more capable. But the true test is yet to come. You will need to return home and show what you have learned, not just to your father, but to yourself. Are you ready?" Desperate turning home meant facing her father, the same man who had sent her away. But she also knew that she was no longer the same girl. She had learned courage, independence, and the power of her own decisions. She was ready to face him, not with fear, but with confidence. The shocking part of Ezekiel's plan, as he explained, was not punishment or cruelty. It was empowerment. He had taken her away from a home where fear ruled, taught her to rely on herself, and prepared her to face life with strength and dignity. When she returned, her father would not recognize the person she had become, and she would have the tools to stand on her own. Lila listened, feeling a mixture of gratitude and awe. She had come to the mountains as a scared, uncertain girl. Now she was leaving, as someone who had discovered her own strength, resilience, and potential. But the lessons were hard, the work exhausting, but the results were undeniable. She could face the world and the people who had once controlled her with confidence. As she packed her bag to return home, Lila looked around the cabin one last time. She had grown attached to the place, to the mountains, and even to Ezekiel, who had become a guide and mentor. She felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing she had overcome challenges she never thought possible. Ezekiel watched her, a faint smile on his face. "Remember," he said, "strength is not just what you can do with your body. It's what you can do with your mind and heart. You are ready. Go, and face your life with confidence." Lila nodded, her heart full of determination. She knew that returning home would not be easy, that her father's reaction could be unpredictable, but she also knew that she was no longer the same girl who had trembled at his words.
She had learned to stand tall, to trust herself, and to face life with courage.
And with that, Lila took her first steps down the mountain path, leaving behind the cabin that had been her school, her refuge, and the place where she had discovered her own strength. The girl who had once been scared and uncertain was gone. In her place was a young woman ready to face the world and ready to show everyone, including her father, what she was capable of. The journey home felt strange to Lila. She had spent weeks learning to survive, to work, and to trust herself in the mountains. The forest that had once frightened her now seemed familiar, almost comforting. She moved with purpose, her step steady, her back straight, and her head held high. Each step reminded her of the strength she had discovered, the strength that no one, not even her father, could take away. As the familiar town came into view, Lila felt a mixture of emotions. She had imagined this moment countless times. What her father would say, how he would react, how she would feel. She was no longer the timid, uncertain girl who had been sent away. She was stronger, braver, and more certain of herself. Yet the thought of facing her father again stirred nerves she had not expected. When she reached her home, the small house looked the same as when she had left it. Dust lay in corners, and the curtains hung limply in the windows.
But to Lila, everything seemed smaller, almost insignificant compared to the vast mountains she had conquered and the challenges she had overcome.
She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her father, Harold, was outside, working in the yard. When he saw her, his face froze. A mixture of surprise, confusion, and something else. Was it fear? She could not be sure. He had expected to see the same frightened, overweight girl who had stumbled under his harsh rules. Instead, he saw someone tall, confident, and composed, with eyes that held a quiet determination.
Lila, he said, his voice catching slightly. You're
Back.
Yes, Lila replied, her voice steady. I'm back. He looked at her closely, noticing the subtle changes, stronger posture, a clearer gaze, a sense of self that had been absent before.
He seemed uncertain, as if he could not quite comprehend the transformation that had taken place. Did Ezekiel teach you? He asked cautiously, almost afraid to speak the words.
Lila nodded.
He taught me to take care of myself, to face challenges, and to see my own value. I've learned more in the mountains than I ever learned at home. Burse. Her father's face hardened, a flash of anger crossing his features.
I sent you there to be punished! You were supposed to learn respect, obedience. I have learned respect, Lila said calmly. Not the kind you tried to force me into with fear, but the kind that comes from understanding my own worth, from learning to face challenges, and from doing my best.
I have learned to respect myself. I have learned to respect myself. And he seemed to struggle with words. He had never been confronted like this. All his life he had demanded obedience, used fear to control, and expected compliance. But here was Lila, standing firm, speaking with a calm authority he had never heard from her before.
Lila continued.
Breath. I am not the same girl who left. I am stronger.
I am capable, and I will not let anyone, especially you, make me feel powerless again.
Breath. Her words hung in the air. For a long moment, her father said nothing. Then he looked away, his hands trembling slightly as he fumbled with a tool in the yard. Lila realized he did not know how to respond, that her growth had caught him off guard. She stepped closer, keeping her voice steady but firm.
I am grateful for the lessons I learned in the mountains. I am grateful for Ezekiel, who helped me find strength I didn't know I had.
But I am not here to be controlled or punished anymore. I am here to live my life on my own terms.
Her father's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment. He had never faced a challenge like this, his daughter standing tall, speaking with confidence, refusing to be intimidated.
For the first time, he realized that fear and control could not shape someone's life the way guidance, patience, and self-discovery could. Over the next few days, Lila settled back into the home she had once known, but everything felt different. She no longer feared her father's words. She helped her mother with chores, organized her room, and began to plan for her future. The girl who had once been insecure, fearful, and withdrawn was now decisive, capable, and determined. Her mother noticed the change immediately. She approached Lila one afternoon while she was sorting through some old clothes. "You've changed," she said softly, almost in awe.
I've never seen you like this. Lila smiled gently. I've learned to believe in myself, Mom.
I've learned that I can face challenges and grow stronger. You don't need to worry about me being weak or helpless anymore. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged Lila tightly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I always hoped you'd find your strength. Even Harold began to change, though slowly. He saw how Lila moved through her days with confidence, how she took responsibility, and how she faced challenges with calm determination. He realized that fear and harsh punishment had never created the respect or independence he thought they would.
Watching Lila, he began to understand that true strength came from guidance, support, and the freedom to grow.
One evening, Lila decided to confront her father more directly. She approached him while he was sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon.
Dad, she began, her voice calm but firm. I need to say something. I am not the same girl who left for the mountains.
I'm strong now. I am capable. And I will not allow fear to control my life anymore.
Harold looked at her, a mixture of regret and confusion in his eyes.
I just wanted you to be better, he said quietly. I didn't know how else to make you listen. You can't make someone better through fear, Lila said. You can only guide, support, and let them grow. Breath. That is what Ezekiel taught me, and that is what I have learned from myself. I will live my life with courage, responsibility, and respect, not because someone forces me, but because I choose to. He glances around in desk. Her father said nothing for a long moment. Lila realized that he was not used to being spoken to this way. He had never faced a child who could stand up with such calm confidence. Slowly, he nodded, almost reluctantly. Breaths.
I understand that now.
The next weeks were a period of adjustment. Lila applied the lessons she had learned in the mountains to her daily life. She woke early, organized her tasks, and faced challenges without fear. She helped around the house, not out of obligation, but because she chose to. She began planning for her future, thinking about school, skills she wanted to develop, and the kind of life she wanted to lead. Her father watched silently, slowly letting go of the need to control. He realized that Lila's independence was not a threat, but a sign of growth. He began to support her choices, albeit quietly at first. He saw that her confidence was not arrogance, but the result of hard work, courage, and self-belief. Lila also took time to reflect on Ezekiel's lessons. She understood now that the punishment her father had imposed had, through Ezekiel's guidance, become a path to empowerment. She felt gratitude, not for the fear she had endured, but for the knowledge, skills, and inner strength she had gained. She knew that the mountains had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. Brash. One afternoon she went for a walk through the fields near her home. The sun was warm, the sky bright, and the wind gentle. She thought about how far she had come, from a scared, insecure girl to someone capable of facing life with confidence. She realized that her journey was just beginning. The mountains had given her tools, but she would continue to grow, learn, and challenge herself every day. Returning home was not the end. It was a new beginning. She had faced fear, learned resilience, and discovered her own worth. Her family, though slow to understand, was beginning to see the change as well. Her father, who had once tried to control her through fear, now saw the power of guidance, support, and trust. Her mother, who had always wished for her daughter's happiness, now watched with pride as Lila stepped into her future with courage. As the days passed, Lila's confidence continued to grow. She spoke up when she had ideas, made decisions for herself, and faced challenges without hesitation. She still remembered the mountains, the lessons from Ezekiel, and the moments when she had felt fear. But now, those memories were not a reminder of weakness. They were proof of her strength.
Her father eventually approached her one evening, a small smile on his face. "You've
Changed," he said quietly. "I see now that I was wrong to try to control you. You are stronger than I imagined." Lila nodded, a calm smile on her face. "Thank you for saying that, Dad. But remember, I don't need to be controlled to grow. I will make my own choices, and I will continue to learn and become stronger every day."
Her father nodded, the first true understanding in his eyes.
I understand now. I am proud of you, Lila. Despair, he says. Truly. For the first time in her life, Lila felt completely seen. Not as a scared, overweight girl. Not as someone to be controlled or punished, but as a young woman with courage, independence, and the ability to shape her own life. She had faced fear, hardship, and challenges, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that nothing could stop her, not fear, not doubt, not even the mistakes of the past. Right. She had learned the most important lesson of all, that strength was not given, but earned, and that true courage came from believing in oneself. Lila's journey from fear to empowerment had ended, but her life was just beginning. She would face challenges, make decisions, and carve her own path. And now she knew she could do it. Because she had already conquered mountains, both literal and figurative, and had discovered the power that had always been inside her.